Countries across the Caribbean are preparing for Hurricane Elsa, which has already caused damages in Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Lucia. At least 20 people missing after a huge landslide in Japan. And Brazilian prosecutors have opened an investigation to President Jair Bolsonaro on allegations of corruption in a COVID vaccine deal. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Western Caribbean nations have launched hurricane preparedness measures as tropical storm Elsa develops into a hurricane. The hurricane has caused substantial damage to infrastructure on the island of Barbados on Friday before moving on to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and a number of people had to be evacuated in St. Lucia. Several nations have been put on alert and closed businesses as authorities prepare for the storm's arrival. The hurricane is headed to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Grenada's National Weather and Sewerage Authority continues to monitor Hurricane Elsa that is currently affecting the country and other Caribbean nations. In Dominica, businesses were shut as a storm warning was issued, but there was no flooding as reported in other islands. Jamaica, Cuba, and the Cayman Islands have also been put on alert.
The stadium was flooded, but I'm told by the guys cleaning it out that there'll be cricket tomorrow. Let's hope that Mother Nature holds up to allow that to happen.
One of my greatest experience. Normally I will look at it grow until it reach higher, but I just stand there and I saw it, the water high in the drain there. So I called my husband immediately and I asked him if in the back to pull a picture of me here. So I had slim chance to save anything.
Hundreds of Brazilians have taken to the streets once again in Rio de Janeiro to demonstrate against President Jair Bolsonaro's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Protesters marched in the streets calling for the president's impeachment and demanding more vaccines. Bolsonaro's popularity has put to the test over his response to the pandemic, which has left over 500,000 people dead in the country. Brazil has the second highest death toll in the world after the US. It also has the third highest number of coronavirus cases and more than 16 million people. Brazilian prosecutors have opened an investigation into allegations that President Jair Bolsonaro sat on corruption evidence in a COVID vaccine deal. The Attorney General's office has reported that it had informed the Brazilian Federal Supreme Court of the opening of an investigation into events reported by 3 senators who have formally asked for an investigation of the far-right president. The Senate Commission is looking into the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and was told last week that a deal to purchase the Covaxin vaccine was a front to embezzle millions of dollars masterminded by a Bolsonaro ally and that the president knew all about it. Bolsonaro will also be investigated by the Supreme Court for possible being involved in a cybercrime. Judge Alexander de Moraes opened an investigation into a possible digital criminal group linked to the Bolsonaro's family with the aim of attacking institutions and undermining democracy. The case is linked to protests in favor of closing the Supreme Court and Congress and the return of a dictatorship. The United Nations mission in Colombia has issued a warning on the increase in the killings of former combatants and community leaders. A report on the killings, which describes the impact of the demonstrations, is issued to be submitted on July 13 to the UN Security Council. According to the report, 54 civilians and 2 police officers have been killed during protests and hundreds have been injured. The report also says 49 social leaders and human rights defenders have been murdered. Peru's Ministry of Justice and Human Rights has refused to provide comprehensive reparations to women who were victims of forced sterilizations in the 1990s. Ana Maria Vidal, lawyer for women's rights group Demus, stressed that the sterilizations were a proven case of violation of fundamental rights under the administration of former President Alberto Fujimori. About 350,000 women were sterilized without their consent under a program launched in 1996, which Fujimori said was aimed at tackling poverty by cutting birth rates. Victims also condemned statements by presidential candidate and daughter of Fujimori, who denied the forced sterilizations and claimed they were a family planning program. Emergency workers have managed to put out a fire that was caused by a gas leak in west of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The company Pemex suspects that a gas leak from an underwater pipeline sparked the blaze. It took more than 5 hours to fully put out the fire. No injuries have been reported from the fire, and the oil company's production was not affected. Investigations on the blaze are still going on. The Argentine Airlines has departed to China to pick up the first batch of the COVID-19 vaccine produced by China's Sinopharm company. The batch is the first of 24 million doses purchased by Argentina from the China National Pharmaceutical Group. Meanwhile, Argentina and Russia have agreed to manufacture the Sputnik V vaccine, which in Argentina will be called Sputnik Vita or Life. Most of the country's 45 million people have been inoculated. The latest coronavirus variant named Lambda has triggered worry in Latin America because of its unusual set of mutations. The variant, also known as Andean, was first detected in Peru, and scientists predict that the strain could become a global concern. According to the World Health Organization, Lambda accounted for 82% of Peru's new COVID-19 cases in May and June and has the world's highest coronavirus mortality rate. In neighboring Chile, it accounts for almost a third of new cases. Lambda has a unique pattern of 7 mutations in the protein that the virus uses to infect human cells. The death toll rises to 22 at the Florida building collapse. Meanwhile, 126 people still missing. 2 more victims were found in the rubble of a partially collapsed apartment building in Florida on Friday, bringing the death toll from last week's tragedy to 22, officials said. The rise in numbers of victims came as Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava says she had signed an order authorizing the demolition of the part of the building that still stands, citing safety issues.
And over the course of today's search, we did recover 2 additional victims. We now have 22 confirmed deaths, 188 people accounted for, and 126 unaccounted for. So again, we cannot move swiftly to demolish this building. The building needs to be carefully evaluated. We have many engineers working together to look at all of the circumstances, make the determination on the timeline. It cannot be before the storm. However, it is storm season. We know the building is unstable. We are going to move forward with demolition. We just have to do it in the safest possible fashion.
More news in a minute. Stay with us.
Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali analyzes the international media influence driven by the empire, acts as an analysis of political, economic, and social life throughout Latin America through our stream and website in English. A critical space committed to truth to determine the conjuncture that moved the world today. The World Today. Mondays on teleSUR.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South, weekdays, only on teleSUR.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. teleSUR documentaries. Sundays, only on teleSUR.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real life. Fridays. Only on teleSUR.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back. 20 people have been reported missing after a powerful landslide crashed into houses in a town west of Tokyo. Dozens of homes have been buried in Atami, according to Shizuoka Prefecture spokesman Takamichi Shiwuyama. Experts say the landslide risk has been increased by valleys and mountains. Evacuation warnings have been issued for a wide area. At the moment, authorities have reported that 20 people are missing, although the number may grow in the next couple of hours.
The big electricity pylons here were shaking all over the place, and no sooner had I wondered what was going on that the mudslides were already there and in the street below too. I was really scared.
Indonesian hospitals have run out of oxygen as COVID-19 continues rising in the Asian country. Several hospitals across Indonesia have reported about the severe lack of oxygen cylinders and have attributed the shortage to soaring COVID-19 cases. Patients have been forced to buy their own oxygen tanks to save their infected members. Indonesia is experiencing a new wave of the pandemic driven by the highly contagious Delta variant.
This line is up to 20 meters long. I have been waiting for 1 hour. My husband is in the hospital and the staff told us they have run out of oxygen, so we have to look for tanks ourselves.
The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has criticized Washington over its military threats and pressure on North Korea. He was speaking during a 3-day World Peace Forum hosted by the Tsinghua University and the Chinese People's Institute of Foreign Affairs.
The United States should reflect on the military threats and pressures it has continuously imposed on North Korea over the past decades. Take North Korea's legitimate concerns seriously and address them, taking into account the measures that North Korea has taken to denuclearize and ease the situation. The United States should respond with sincerity.
The World Health Organization has called for the immunization of the entire world population as the COVID-19 new variant Delta takes its toll in several countries.
We're in a very dangerous period of this pandemic. In those countries with low vaccination coverage, terrible scenes of hospitals overflowing are again becoming the norm. But no country on earth is out of the woods yet. The Delta variant is dangerous and is continuing to evolve and mutate, which requires constant evaluation and careful adjustment of the public health response. I have urged leaders across the world to work together to ensure that by this time next year, 70% of all people in every country are vaccinated. This is the best way to slow the pandemic, save lives, drive a truly global economic recovery, and along the way, prevent further dangerous variants from getting the upper hand.
Portugal has been placed under nighttime curfew to curb a rising fourth wave of COVID-19. Under the new rules, nearly 4 million people will be banned from leaving their homes between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. In areas designated as high risk or very high risk, restaurants, cafes, businesses, and cultural venues must cut back their opening hours and the number of visitors and clients. Weekend travel between Lisbon and the rest of the country has already been banned for the past 2 weeks as authorities ramp up testing and vaccination.
This is the best thing to do, and I advise everyone to come and get tested to end this pandemic. I am in favor of a curfew because at night nobody respects anything. It is a shame what you see at night in Lisbon. It doesn't affect me. I think it is a good idea. We should have been stricter before. We created this vaccination center to help the Ministry of Health and to accelerate the vaccination process at a higher rate in order to protect the population more quickly. It is linked with the progression of the pandemic, with the vaccines and the reinforcement of the army for the Ministry of Health. Our goal is to accelerate, to vaccinate the greatest number of people in a very short time.
Cuban-made vaccines have been prized for having high efficiency rates. The 5 jabs under development have passed all 3 clinical trial phases internationally required for vaccines. One of them, Abdala, has shown efficiency of 92.8%. The other, Soberana O2, registered 62% efficiency. In relation with the ethical principles of the Cuban Revolution, the vaccines will be made available to fellow developing countries under fair conditions.
The serious problem we have had and we continue to have in our region is precisely the availability of vaccines. All our countries have started to vaccinate, but we are going slowly because, of course, we depend on this valuable input.
Just like everything Cuba does, just like it sends doctors on missions, this vaccine is going to be useful for all the countries that are poor, that are less developed.
United States President Joe Biden is considering lifting sanctions imposed on Cuba by former President Donald Trump, a top National Security Council official said. The measure will include re-allowing money remittances to Cuba as well as travel between the island and the United States. However, other economic, financial, and trade sanctions will remain in place, continuing a blockade established about 60 years ago. Last month, the United Nations General Assembly condemned such practices.
But Trump still claiming Cuba will be free soon. And you will have that.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay tuned.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
It is our duty to reverse the damage we cause to the planet. Let's recover our natural ecosystems with actions in defense of the environment. Let's keep fighting for a greener world. Wednesdays, only on teleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays, only on teleSUR. We share your feelings, exalt your accomplishments, and show your reality. Our approach is global and keeps us in tune with the peoples. Caribbean countries also get our signal. With enthusiasm, we will continue to broadcast for them. Because we are teleSUR, the news broadcaster from South America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Women activists in Senegal have demonstrated in the capital Dakar against increasing rape cases in the African country. Dozens of demonstrators denounced the country's justice system for not issuing different sentences to rapists. They also slammed the country's cultural system for being harsh towards women. The activists demanded the government to provide structures, shelters, and everything needed to support rape victims.
We expect the state to provide structures, shelters, and everything needed to support victims. What we want from the state today is for women, who make up more than half the population, to feel safe. And if we don't feel safe in our homes, if we don't feel safe in the street, and we don't feel safe at all with the state and the justice system, there is a problem. And we cannot continue to live in a country that does not consider us.
Ethiopian soldiers captured by the Tigray Defense Force have walked towards Mekelle Rehabilitation Center in the capital of the Tigray region. According to the Tigray Defense Forces, more than 7,000 captive Ethiopian soldiers have walked from the Abdi Eshir, about 75 kilometers southwest of Mekelle, for 4 days. The rebels marched into the city this week after local officials and federal government troops pulled out, and the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has since declared a unilateral ceasefire. Transnational corporations will have to pay a 50% tax on profit everywhere they operate, following an agreement by the member states of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The initiative came from the United States, seeking to collect revenues from its own corporations, most of which have fixed residency in tax-haven countries. Amazon and Google were giving us examples of multinationals making tax-free profits all over the world. According to Matthias Cormann, Secretary General of the organization, 130 countries supported the agreement, and it's estimated that this tax will represent annual revenues totaling some $150 billion. The United States has put Turkey on a list of countries suspected of using child soldiers. The country is the first and only North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally to be included in the group. The U.S. State Department determined that Turkey was providing support to the Sultan Murad division in Syria, a group that has allegedly recruited child soldiers. Countries put on the State Department's list could face regulations on security, aid, and the commercial licensing of military equipment, but the State Department has not said whether or not Turkey will be restricted. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan accused the U.S. of being behind a failed military coup in 2016. Hundreds of aid workers in Syria had demonstrated calling for an extension of a United Nations resolution to avoid the closure of the last cross-border point with Turkey. The Bab al-Had on the border of the frontier with Turkey is the last of 4 crossing points that remain open and is set to close on July 10th. According to UN officials, the cross-border operations ensure supply of basic goods for 2.4 million people. The majority of the vulnerable recipients of the aid crossing the border are women and children.
Today, we as humanitarian workers in northern Syria organized a human chain of more than 3 kilometers near the Bab al-Hawa border crossing to call for the extension of a UN resolution allowing the entry of aid through the Bab al-Hawa crossing for those living in camps in northern Syria. There are more than 1.8 million people who benefit from food baskets and 2.3 million who benefit from drinking water, shelters, wash, drinking water sanitation and hygiene, and medical projects, especially amid the coronavirus.
In Eswatini, a small landlocked kingdom surrounded by South Africa and Mozambique, hundreds of people have protested against their monarchy. King Swati called in the army to suppress the protests. Police have been firing tear gas, gunshots, and intimidating with low-altitude helicopter flights. Most of Eswatini's 1.3 million inhabitants are rural farmers. The country is one of the world's poorest, but they are forced to pay for the king's luxuries, among them 11 palaces for his 15 wives and over 100 children. African leaders have paid tribute to Zambian independence leader Kenneth Kaunda, who died last month, aged 97. The ceremony was held at the National Heroes Stadium in the capital, Lusaka. Leaders from across Africa expressed gratitude to the veteran leaders' role in liberating their countries from colonial rule. Kaunda was the last surviving leader of the Frontline States, a coalition of independent African nations committed to ending apartheid in the 1960s. The leader served as the first president of Zambia from 1964 to 1991.
Dr. Kenneth Kaunda.
And we come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories as always in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.
Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough, and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber.